What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about some things that wide receiver coaches don't usually teach. So the first one we're going to be discussing today is taking an inside release when you have to run an outside breaking route, like an out route or a corner route, based on the DB's leverage. So a lot of times what wide receiver coaches teach, especially coaches at schools, is that like, oh, if you're running an outside breaking route, like an outside breaking route would be classified as like any type, like a 5-yard out, a 10-yard out, a corner, maybe some people might consider a comeback, some people consider it a fade. They think that, okay, no matter what, you have to release to the outside because it's an outside breaking route. Now, are there times where there are plays called MORs? That means mandatory outside release. Yes, where you have to release to the outside generally because of the play concept. That's generally on like a fade route. If you're running a fade route and it's a mandatory outside release, usually we have somebody coming back underneath running an out route, and it's so that DB gets like out of the way, turns his back so we could throw the out route, and if he's outside leverage, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But more often than not, it's not an MOR, and you have to take a release opposite of the DB's leverage, and I'll explain why. So this is a great example here of how to actually do that. So this receiver closes space, restacks to the inside, gives a move, and then is able to win on his 15-yard out. So let's talk about it, right? So the release that you take, whether it's outside or inside, is based off of two things. It's based off of the distance the DB has from us and his leverage. So his leverage is essentially where he is shaded, right? So if he was shaded to the inside, like let's say he was lined up where I drew this box, that means he'd have inside leverage. Let's say he was directly in front of us, that means he would be head up, so he doesn't really have a leverage. So that means you would want to generally release to the side of the route. That's when it's more so based on the route, or I guess you could say the route break if he's head up. Now, in this case, because he's shaded to the outside, that means he has outside leverage. So right off the bat, you walk up to the line, you see outside leverage, you know what he's trying to accomplish. He does not want us to go to the outside, and he wants to force us to the inside where he would have some type of help, whether that's a linebacker or whether that's a safety. Now, obviously, this is one-on-ones, but so he's playing outside leverage in one-on-ones, not because he has safety help, but because the receiver has a reduced split. That means he's the outside receiver who's normally lined up on the numbers, but he cut his split down and he's lined up closer to the hash. So generally in one-on-ones when receivers do this, the DB is expecting an outside breaking route. So that's why he's like that in one-on-ones, but in a real game scenario, it would be because he has help to the inside, and it could be because of a reduced split, but he's not going to play this way unless he has help to the inside in a real game, right? So our game plan can't be, okay, off the ball, I'm going to give him a hard fake inside, and then I'm going to release to the outside. His entire goal, his DB coach is all over him about this. Do not let that receiver release to the outside. And if that receiver does release to the outside, you are going to get hands on him and you are going to try to reroute him. So when he breaks to that outside breaking route, he doesn't have a ton of space for the quarterback to lead him on outside breaking routes like corners or like out routes, because those are towards the sideline. And the sideline is another defender on the field, you guys. If you're right on the sideline or you're out of bounds, obviously the quarterback ain't going to throw you the ball. You got to give him room, which is why we ultimately want to take the inside release. So we want to off the ball attack his leverage, make him think we're trying to release to the outside. Could this receiver have closed a little bit more space and gotten to his toes and given his move? Absolutely. But he just gives him this quick little jab step off the ball and he takes the inside release. Now, at this point, this is where a lot of receivers panic, and this is why a lot of receivers don't like to do this, and why a lot of receiver coaches don't like to teach this, is, well, our goal is to obviously stack the DB. We want him to be running directly behind me, trailing my hips, so at the break point, I could give him some type of move like a rocker step, which is essentially like a 1-2. You step in the direction you're going first, and you fake like you're running an in route or a post route or whatever the case may be. Now, if we can't restack him and he is right next to me, right on my hip, that's where receivers start to panic. But all you would do is you would drop your hips, take your inside hand, or your outside hand, put it on the back of his shoulder, swat him by, and cut underneath him. The QB would rather have a slightly slower break, but all of this room to lead us, than a forced outside release where, oh, cool, I'm able to cut off on 1 foot, but I got no room to lead him, and a DB right on our hip. So luckily what this receiver is able to do is he's able to stack him and get him trailing, so he does a move called a rocker step. So he steps where he's going first, fakes to the inside like he's running a post, gets that DB to bite, and then look at all the space he has for the quarterback to be able to lead him. And he's able to get separation because his move was good. So guys, don't force your release. Don't think, oh, just because I have an outside breaking route, I got to release to the outside. Just because I have an inside breaking route, I got to just release to the inside. It's based on the DB's leverage, unless it's a situation where it would be an MOR, mandatory outside release, or if it's a situation where it's a mandatory inside release. Now, fellas, before we get to the rest of this video, if you are a quarterback or wide receiver watching this and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches, we are traveling out to 15 different cities this offseason for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So, guys, if you go to that very first link in the description below, that is where you can find all the information and where you can sign up. Our camps are a little bit different style. It's not like, a college camp or an exposure camp where we're trying to get as many people out there and just go through drills as fast as we possibly can. It's more like training, you guys. We take the time to work with you one-on-one, individually. You screw up, we're going to tell you where you went wrong and how to ultimately improve. So with that being said, our spots are limited for all of these camps. As you can see on the screen here, we only got 5 spots left in San Francisco, 10 in Orlando, and then 12 left in Phoenix. So once those spots go, you guys, we have to turn people away and add people to a wait list, and every single camp on our list will sell out, you guys. So fellas, make sure you take advantage of the fact that we have open spots, because we will not very soon. Go to that very first link in the description. That is where you can sign up. Our next camp is going to be in San Francisco. Then we're heading out to Orlando, Phoenix, Columbia, South Carolina, Seattle, Oklahoma City, Nashville, Milwaukee, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Denver, Columbus, Boston, Salt Lake City, and finishing it off in Los Angeles, California. So guys, go to that very first link in the description below. That's where you can sign up. We'd love to see you there. Now, the next thing that I feel not a lot of wide receiver coaches teach is the throw-by move. Similar to what we just talked about when you had to run that out route and you weren't able to restack the defender, but this is going to be a little bit different. I feel like a lot of receiver coaches maybe teach this throw-by, but I feel like they don't teach it correctly, right? So, Jameson Williams here is going to be running just like a simple, like you could think of it like a curl route, like maybe 12 back to 10. Maybe it's more of like a stop route where he's just supposed to put the brakes on and the ball's being thrown to him. But remember, this is more like an inside breaking route because he is turning to the inside. But look what he does. He takes the outside release. He's not forcing the inside release just because he has an inside breaking route. Pre-snap, this DB was lined up where? He was lined up inside leverage. So what does Williamson do? He gives a little move to the inside, attacks his leverage, takes the outside release. A lot of times on a throw-by move, what receivers will do is that before they drop their hips, because you have to drop your hips on a route like a curl or like a comeback or a hitch, sometimes even a dig route, is that they will run, and right before they break, they start to give away what they're doing, and they will put that hand on the back of the DB's arm too early, you guys. We want to wait until the last possible second, because think about it from a DB perspective. If you got a receiver running with you and he's downfield and his inside hand isn't pumping his arms and he's not running fast and he puts that hand on the back of our shoulder, the back of our elbow, we're automatically thinking he's going to try to throw by, and DB's going to slow down. He is not going to have his hips open. He's not going to believe that it is a fade route, because that's what you have to sell on every single route. You have to make this DB believe that we're trying to ultimately run past him, run deep, and run downfield. So watch what he does at the last second. As he starts to drop his hips, that's when he gets real violent with the inside arm and swats by. The 3 points of attack, the 3 points of attack are the wrist, the elbow, or the back of the shoulder. You don't want to swat the DB's hands because that's not necessarily a point of control. You swat his hand's going to go right back to you, right? A point of control, and this is like for those of you that maybe like wrestle or for those of you that do maybe jujitsu, they talk about like wrist control, like controlling a guy's wrist, right? Rather than fighting his hands. Same idea on a throw-by. You want to swat at the wrist, at the elbow, or the shoulder. Those are the points of control. If he's really close, you probably could swat by on his hip too as well. That is also a point of control, because that's what's going to get his momentum shooting forward. So he swats by as he puts the brakes down at the last second, and you see, again, not a ton of separation, but when you have a good quarterback, that's all he needs. All he needs is a step, especially if he is throwing that thing on time. So throw-by move is a great move that you guys can use. You could use this if you were running a dig, if you were running a post, or absolutely a curl route, especially where you have to drop your hips. Great example here from Williamson doing that type of move. Now, the next thing I feel not enough wide receiver coaches teach, especially like kind of older school wide receiver coaches, they don't necessarily teach like snapping down. Their method of breaking at the top of the route, this is another example of like a curl route, right? So like a 12 back to 10. This might be a little bit deeper, more like 15 back to 12. But a lot of coaches will teach like beat the drum. Now, I'm not going to say that that's wrong, because it's not wrong. That is a way that you guys can change direction. I'm just always a firm believer that in football, like the game consistently evolves, right? And you see a lot of receiver coaches that do teach this. A lot of receiver trainers teach this, and it's great. It's a great thing to do. It's just, I feel like beating the drum is very old school, because it's not as efficient. You're not going to be able to get out of the break as efficient and as quickly as you should. And that's why I feel like the game is consistently evolving. There are always more efficient ways to get in and out of your breaks, to make faster cuts, and to give the DB less time to react. Just like the quarterback position. Quarterbacks don't throw the ball the same way that they threw it in the 1990s or early 2000s. They throw the ball much differently now. And the position consistently evolves, and there's always more efficient ways to do it. And it's on coaches to be able to adopt those efficient ways in my opinion. So when he goes to make this break, I want you to pay attention to his hip drop. Very aggressive. He snaps down, gets in and out of this break. Was it the cleanest break in the world? No, and we'll talk about how he can improve it a little bit. But the first part of this break where he snaps on the outside foot, we call that the trigger step. Because you have to think, guys, when a DB is in man-to-man coverage, his eyes are going to be watching my hips, right? Even if he's in like off-man and he's in a back pedal, he's going to be watching my hips. And so if you guys do that beat the drum method where your hands move really fast and you chop your feet, yes, you'll make a break, but that's a very slow process. I want to eliminate wasted time. So when you get into the break, this outside foot would be considered a trigger step. That's like your snap down step, if you will. So the goal is to be able to be from a position where you are ultimately running and you are dropping to a 90-degree angle as quickly as you can. I tell my receivers, pretend there's a string attached to your chin and you're pulling the string down to your knee. Now, when guys teach beat the drum, they do teach sink the hips or like slowly drop the hips. But if you could get to that low 90-degree position faster by snapping down or using that trigger step, it just gets you out of the break quicker because you have less time. It's faster to be able to get to that low position where you guys can make a sharp cut. Route running is all about selling, and it's all about having sharp, efficient movements with little to wasted steps and little to no wasted time, right? So he breaks down, or he snaps down, I should say. And now the second step of this break to get him out a little bit easier, probably could have pivoted a little bit more. Like you almost want to think if you're running a curl and you snap with your outside foot, your second step should try to pivot at a 45. So your third step can hook around and your hips can get around and you get back to the quarterback. His second step didn't necessarily pivot enough, so that's why he kind of drifts to the inside. But again, if you're violent with that first step, pivot with the second step, you're out of that break in so much less wasted time. And that's the key. Beating the drum is not wrong. You are going to change direction like that, but there is a faster and more efficient way, and that is what I would consider snapping down. So guys, if you're a receiver, you have to make sure on breaks where you got to drop your hips, snapping down is the most important.